How you doing, Bob?
That part was nice. And the food was nice.
This didn't use the curve, did it? This, something feels different.
Where's the little light? How can you tell whether you're on or off?
Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's been that long, but for some reason, something just feels different.
Oh, this is a new.
This is a new
The
desk.
second time we had this.
This desk. Okay. I think maybe the first time when I came in, I was rushing and I didn't pay too much attention to the desk configuration. I knew we was gonna have the laptops or the iPads, but looks like a long one.
It was a long week.
Were you running Wednesday morning?
We left on a Friday, got there Saturday, overseas flight, and then left over there the following.
Yesterday, yes, yesterday. Yesterday morning. It was like Wednesday morning. Oh, yeah, that was yesterday. It was a long time ago. I saw somebody turn off what I think it was your old stream in front of me, and I couldn't catch it. But somebody had your bill, and it was running from your street, turning
I don't know anything about golf. Years ago, I said I was gonna put on my bucket list to learn how to play, but I just had not taken the opportunity to do it yet.
You like my seat? No. I'm going to have to get up and leave anyway. At some point.
Around here, it's gonna have to be in the fall for me to learn. It's too hot outside.
I'm still not used to these. Is the mic on or off? Oh, wow. I wasn't here last month. That's on. How do you know?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 14th of July Design Development Review Commission meeting for the City of Columbia. The commission is made up of volunteers with expertise or interest in historic preservation and design. We generally meet on the second Thursday of the month to review cases. The commission is supported by the city's urban planning and historic preservation staff who are here today. Please let them know if you have any questions, taking care not to impede the proceedings. The meeting generally proceeds with staff calling the case and describing it. The applicant may also come forward to add to the basic description of the request if necessary. If so, please try to keep your presentation If so, please try to keep your presentation to less than 10 minutes. The commissioners will then have the opportunity to ask questions. After this period, I will ask if there is anyone in the audience who wishes to speak for or against the proposal, and audience comments shall be kept to 2 minutes per person. If there is, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond, and this rebuttal shall be kept to 5 minutes. In most of the cases, we will make a decision tonight after all information has been presented. If your case is denied, or if you feel that your decision was made in error, you and anyone with standing have the opportunity to appeal it within 30 days of the decision. All decisions of this commission are based on existing guidelines and ordinances. If you plan to speak about a specific project, you must have signed in. The sheet is either at the back of the room or at the podium. Please note that these meetings are streamed live, they are recorded and broadcast, so please use discretion with any personal information you choose to share in the course of these proceedings. All motions and decisions are made while applying all of the facts to all of the guidelines. Are there or any of the parties planning to testify, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings? Thank you very much. Have a seat. Will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bachnight,
Here.
Ms. Great,
Here.
Mr. Gressett,
Present.
Mr. Cohn,
Here.
Mr. Powell, Mr. Savory, Mr. Wynn.
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you very much. Does the agenda still stand?
We've had some changes to the agenda since publication. 1015 King Street, which was number 8 under the historic portion of the agenda, has resolved issues with that case and has been moved to the consent agenda. This is a request for a certificate of design approval for new construction in the Old Shandon Lower Waverly area. Under the historic portion of the agenda, number 7, 3101 Lindsay Street, a request for a certificate of design approval for an addition and exterior changes in the Earlwood protection area has been withdrawn. And 1634 Main Street, a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill for an individual landmark has been deferred.
Thank you. The consent agenda, as such, as presented or utilized by the Design Development Review Commission, is used to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. Examples of such items include residential site improvements, such as fences, minor exterior changes, or signage. If a member of the DDRC or the general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda at the beginning of the meeting, that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered during the meeting. The DDRC then approves the remaining consent agenda items. Will you read the consent agenda, please?
929 Gervais Street, a request for a certificate of design approval for exterior changes in the West Gervais Historic Commercial District. This is also a Bailey Bill project. 1608 Main Street, which is a request for a certificate of site plan review for an individual landmark. 1328 Richland Street, which is a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill for a building in the landmark district. And of course 1015 King Street, which was moved to consent and again was a request for a certificate of design approval for new construction in Old Shandon Lower Waverly protection area.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone wishing to remove an item from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as it stands?
Mr. Chairman, based on the recommendations of staff and their review, I make the motion that we accept the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Gressett. Is there a second?
Second.
Very good. We've got a second. Any discussion? Will you call the roll, please, for a vote?
Mr. Bachnight,
Yes.
Ms. Great,
Yes.
Mr. Gressett,
Yes.
Mr. Cohn,
Yes.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Savory,
Yes.
Mr. Wynn.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I'm so sorry to interrupt,
sorry.
but can I just mention that we're all getting used to new mics, and I know the buttons don't actually tell you whether they're on or off. So if everyone would just check their mics, you have to push the button for it to be on. Whenever you speak, you're probably going to have to check yourself. Apparently, recording is not going well. So if you'd be careful to speak directly in the mic and make sure it's on.
Thank you. And to that same note, I will encourage anyone who comes to the podium to speak to please lean forward and speak into the mic so that recordings are efficient, please.
We also have a handheld mic
And-
here in case someone prefers that.
Correct. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll move on now to the regular agenda. Will you introduce the first case, please?
The first case is 2025 Main Street. This is a request for certificate of design approval to install solar panels on the roof.
Excuse me, let me interrupt you for a second. For this case, 2025 Main Street, I will have to recuse myself from this particular case.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. This is in the City Center Design District. The applicant received a grant to install solar panels on the roof of this building. The grant application process was completed and awarded prior to permitting. When the applicant went to obtain a permit for installation, they were informed that the property was in an urban design overlay district and requires design review. The City Center Design Development Guidelines do not have specific guidelines for solar panels. However, they do require that any changes to the exterior of the building that are visible from the public right-of-way receive a certificate of design approval prior to permitting. The guideline used to evaluate the proposal addresses roof-mounted utility equipment. The current proposal does not meet the applicable guideline. Staff worked with the applicant to provide alternative solutions such as solar film that can be applied to the roof between the seams. However, the grant process is evidently too far along to reconsider different technologies for this application. Therefore, the application was denied and the unmodified proposal is before the commission as an appeal to the staff decision. And I think the applicant, Trip Hathaway, is here to present the project and also to answer any questions from the commission.
Mr. Hathaway, would you like to come forward and
I guess if we could get the slide presentation up. Give us a minute. For 2025 Main Street. And then you can just click through this right here. You're welcome.
I wish I were Trip Hathaway, but I'm not. Trip is on I-26 headed this way right now, so I'm going to brief a little bit. I am Craig Curry. I have the privilege and honor of leading transitions. This goal here is to put on solar panels on the roof so we can cut our power bill significantly. We're looking at an 8% cut on the power bill. Presently for that building, it's $74,000 a year. So we're looking in the ballpark of $6,000 savings per year. That's significant for us. Our overall electric bill is $114,000 in the entire facility. The building that we're proposing that this goes on is the larger building that uses a larger portion of that electrical power. With that said, the $6,000 that we save is 270 folks that could be housed in total. So every year is a choice between paying $6,000 more in the power bill or taking care of 270 people. I think the wise choice for us as a nonprofit is to try to maximize our cost. The solar panel will go facing towards the west, and I think we've got some pictures here. Skip some of these. Here we go. You can look where this is, and there's a facade that faces Elmwood. And so the reality here is these solar panels are barely visible at all. I was over there this morning walking on the sidewalk, and literally over in the adjacent parking lot, if you look at the right angle, you could actually see them a little bit. So the reality here is these will be not hardly visible at all, and they will save us a lot of power bill so that we can then take care of homeless folks as we like to do. Additionally, if you look in this picture, down from the blue awning on the Elmwood side, Columbia Green, which we're very grateful for, has helped us decorate and put plants. So we're very concerned about the appearance of our facility. We don't want a facility that does not look good. On the Elmwood side, we've got landscaping that Columbia Green did. Columbia Green also helped us on the Calhoun side of the facility, and we've put a mosaic in on the Main Street side. So we're very serious about the neighborhoods and trying to honor them and be a facility that looks good and has nothing that's detracting. We firmly believe that these solar panels will not be detracting to the appearance of our facility at all and will only save money for us. Additionally, there are solar panels across the street on the facility on Hope Plaza. So there are solar panels that are on buildings. So again, the precedent is already there, and we're just interested in continuing and trying with that precedent and trying to save our power bill as well. With that said, unless Tripp is standing behind me, a man in a white shirt with an orange thing on his pocket, I'm going to stop and ask if there are any questions from anyone that I can try to answer.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. At this time, we should ask, are there people in the audience in opposition or support of this particular design issue? Okay. So now we can deliberate by the commissioners. Any questions from any of the commissioners?
The packet that we were given included some drawings that showed where these solar panels would be. Is that in our sequence? Can we pull those up?
There's the view of where they will be looking from ground level, and I think these pictures here now, they aren't the schematic, but they show exactly where the panels would go. And let me see if he has, again, some more shots. Here he's showing you the panels on the adjacent building that's across the street from our facility. Here he's showing you examples of what they actually look like. Other examples of people who have used these. These are used in Charleston. I know Water Mission uses them. They save quite a bit of money on their facility as well. And again, $6,000 a year is a significant grant. So we have to go out and find that money to take care of homeless folks.
Is it on now? Yeah. Staff has made some recommendations. It is to approve it, but also to move them a little further over, either on the roof that you're proposing to put them on, so that they're further away from Elmwood Avenue, or to put them on the adjacent built-up roof that's right to the south. Is there any objection to doing one of those two? 'Cause that seems
I have
like
no
an easy thing to
objection
do.
as long as they work, and we would work with the contractor to make sense out of this. I'm not the engineer here, so I'm not going to tell you. He tried to maximize the solar energy that they would receive during the day.
Well, excuse me. Go ahead.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
One advantage of putting them on the flat roof is that you could actually orient them south, or at least southwest. The more they're oriented south, the more of the arc of the sun they would get. So that seems like that actually might be an advantage from a solar gain standpoint. But you don't have an objection to putting them on
No,
the flat
we
roof?
would do what makes sense to get the project. I mean, the grant has been approved. It's costing us as all we're going to do here is save our energy bill, so we're excited about that. If moving it on the wall, the roof helps, we'll do that. If that's better, it's not as visible, we can certainly go back with the staff and figure out what makes good sense.
I also support the idea of having them. I think that's a wonderful idea. I would encourage you to talk to staff and see if you could relocate them. They would be less visible, and I think you would get a better sun orientation by facing south, and the buildings are set that way. Actually, we have a 12 and 12 roof slope, or you could use the flat roof area behind the mansard.
One advantage of the flat roof, too, is that you can get to them to service them, because they need service from time to time.
I actually talked about the flat roof, and I wish I were smarter. I could probably answer this better, but they did assure me they were better where they were picked. So let's go back to the staff, and we'll certainly try to make sense. Again, out there this morning, they're barely visible. I mean, even if you stand there and look up, you got to really be looking for them. And if you're driving a vehicle and you're looking that much, you're going to hit the person in front of you. So I really don't think this is going to be a detractor.
Okay, are there any other comments? Do we have a motion from any of the commissioners?
I will move that we recommend approval of installation of the solar panels with the condition that they be mounted preferably on the flat roof or at a location on the pitched roof further south, if it's not possible, to be worked out with staff.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? May we have the vote?
Mr. Bachnight,
Yes.
Ms. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Gressett,
Yes.
Mr. Cohn,
Yes.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Savory.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, as you approach and return to us, I'm afraid I need to recuse myself from the next case.
Very good, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gressett. Will you present the next case, please?
Case number 2 on the urban design agenda is 1400 Lady Street. This is a request for certificate of design approval for renovations to an existing building in the City Center Design Development District. This project came before the Commission in March of this year to request a change to the front facade, second and third floor window pattern. The request was denied, and the architects have continued to work towards a design that will add transparency to the interior space while attempting to meet the design guidelines. There are 2 design alternatives, and for the purposes of this evaluation, they will be referred to as options A and B, with A being the all-glass atrium and option B, the glass and translucent wall system. This building at the southeast corner of Lady and Marion Streets was designed by Upshur, Riley, and Boltman for SCE&G to consolidate their customer services and included a community meeting space. The building, built in 1970, has many of the typical features of mid-century institutional architecture. Heavy streamlined upper floors supported by slim columns and light transparent base, strong geometric shapes and fixed windows, an asymmetrical entrance with a curved wall feature, and decorative abstract mosaic tile work. And I believe the applicants are here to make a presentation, which is on the screen.
Thank you. Please step forward and please state your name to begin.
My name is Chuck Holstrand, architect with LS3P Architects.
Thank you. You've been sworn in. I think I remember that you were sworn in.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes, what we'd like to start out with is looking at the existing building, and a key aspect of this building is that it creates a grid of horizontality and verticality with the arrangement of the structure, the precast panels, and the window grid. And what we attempted to do is to, go closer, okay. What we've attempted to do is to work with the grid of the building and to create a new addition that will create a strong sense of entry and openness to the community. So we looked for inspiration to a number of studies, case studies, that did some similar gestures. This one in Washington, D.C., a building of some historical merit that is within a few steps of the U.S. Capitol, an area that is considered to be very carefully monitored in terms of design review and construction of new components. This addition did something similar to what we're proposing, to create a new vertical entry of glass that is open to the community and draws people into the building. In a similar way, more locally, we've looked at this project on the corner of Lady at Hugie, where a brick building has been added to with a strong entry of glass that, again, opens up to the community what was a very solid building. And in this case, at the State Museum, to be able to open up the front entry with a lot of glass that tends to draw people in, and looking at the side where the newest addition was created, to take a portion of the building and cover that with glass so that you don't lose the existing building, but create a new environment that draws the community into it. So when we look at our building, what we're intending to do is something inspired by those ideas, such that we are now opening this building up to the community in a way that it wasn't before. In fact, the original building had this sense of being somewhat of a fortress on the second and third floors, looking like it's not a place that you're intended to go, which in fact was the original design intent. The public was intended to go on the ground floor, but not really to access the upper office floors. In our case, we're looking for a radical change in the nature of this building to make it more of a vital part of our community. The idea that Lady is a pedestrian-oriented street is an important part of this. So at the ground level, we're creating terraces that are designed for people to meet together, to sit down, to enjoy the street environment. And while they're there, to understand that this building is suddenly broken open to them so that they are drawn up to the library on the next floor behind the glass, or the reception zone on the third floor behind the glass. This is a very different adaptation of what was a very closed building. Now you can see some of the other views of this. This is part of that pedestrian terrace where we intend to create seating outside, both on seat walls as well as furniture that would invite people to join into this area. And you can see the two options here. They're very similar, but have subtle differences. Part of the idea is to allow the existing building to retain its strong horizontal precast flow. We'll look at a couple of the site plans, and you can see where this is located on the site. It's an asymmetrical location, which is where the current entry is located. And so you can see on the elevation that asymmetry echoes the current building, really accentuates the sculptural wall on the right where the mosaic tile is shown. And what we're doing is we're creating a new entry so that people really approach the wall first, the mosaic tile wall first from the corner, and then are drawn into the coffee shop and the other elements that bring people together in this place. This shows the other scheme. You can see that in either case, the intent is that visibility to the community, the openness, and really retaining the character of the existing building. The strongest component that's first noticed on the building is the horizontal lines of the precast. You can see that still goes through behind the glass. The other component that's very noticeable is the grid of the windows, and you'll see in a moment how we've reflected that. This shows an upper view of this glass area. We intend for the side to be a translucent glass so that we are saving energy from the western sun. This shows an even more energy-saving approach to that idea. And you can see on the floor plan that these new entry additions echo the geometries of the existing building, where it goes off-grid in the sculptural nature of the building on the ground floor. Now, this begins to give you an idea of how we have essentially shifted the glass plane from the surface of the building out to this new added lobby space, so that we're basically taking the same grid of mullions and windows and shifting it outwards. In either scheme, that is the case. And so you can see from this diagram, what we're basically doing is taking the exact window pattern as discussed in the guidelines, and taking the same proportion, shape, pattern, and spacing, and drawing that into this new element. This gives another view of how that works. So bottom line is we're creating a new environment for people in the community to enjoy while being faithful to the principles that we see in the guidelines.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may identify myself, I'm Ken Wingate. I'm the chairman of the governing body called the Session of First Presbyterian Church. And I would like to pick up and add a couple of additional thoughts and perspectives. While I speak, I rarely do this. I always speak from extemporaneous, but today, because of the time savings, I would request, while I read my very brief remarks, that you folks on the commission look at the building. And let me make a few observations, if I may, from the guidelines set forth for the DDRC to follow. The subject property shown before you at 1400 Lady Street is located, as you all know, within what is defined as the, quote, city center. Pursuant to the Design Development Guidelines, page 2-2, and as such, I want to quote two sentences, if I may, and you can see the activity that's going there in the architect's conceptual rendering of this new entry tower that we propose. Quote, as such, an important aspect of any development pattern is to reinforce the human scale and urban character of the area, setting the tone for new development in other parts of the city center. The guidelines encourage the type of livable, vibrant, urban neighborhood development that will result in the revitalization of the entire city center. End quote. That's on page 2-2 of your guidelines. As you also are aware, members of the commission, properties within the city center, within this segment of Lady Street, are categorized as, quote, street hierarchy. It is one of the avenues through city center that is designated for pedestrian priority, according to page 2-6 of your guidelines. Note, looking at this design submitted by LS3P, that this adds a small courtyard adjoining the glass entry tower, which invites pedestrian traffic and interaction. As noted in your guidelines, the character of projects should build on, quote, the sense of place. Thereby, renovated properties such as this contribute to the synergy of important pedestrian spaces. And actually, as Mr. Holstrand indicated, the prior use was as an office building by SCANA with the express desire that the community not enter any of the upper spaces, only the first floor for payment of power bills. This is turning that on its head and actively inviting the public into the first floor and two upper floors, all of which are public spaces, including things such as a coffee shop, a bookstore, meeting rooms, and other public spaces. In section 2.4 of your guidelines, the city center is encouraged to be developed with organizing elements centered around pedestrian activity and social interaction. One of the main purposes in this desired modification presented before you today for requested approval is to open the building to the community and to invite the community into the building both physically and, as you can see there before you, also visually. Further, as specified in section 3.4 of your guidelines, the review process, that which we are all engaged in today in the public meeting, is to be, quote, a well-defined, fair, and cooperative, not adversarial process. First Presbyterian Church has certainly attempted to follow both the letter and the spirit of the law in this regard. From the very preliminary stages several months ago through your initial denial of a different design proposal, we have continued to work collaboratively with and have appreciated the opportunity for feedback and input from your staff. Pursuant to step 5, following your guidelines through its sequence of procedures, the members of DDRC, you the commissioners, as opposed to staff, are asked to consider the application, and today I'm requesting that you take action dissenting from the staff recommendation, and therefore I'm requesting that you issue a certificate of design compliance. The key question, Mr. Chairman, under the guidelines is what standard of review? How are you to make the decision? What standard of review? May I continue?
If you have not much longer, sir, he will
I have
give
not
you
much
an
longer. I
extra.
have one more page.
Very
Double
okay.
spaced. The key question under the guidelines is the standard of review that you, members of DDRC, should apply in reaching your determination. The board's task, your task, is a legal interpretation of the guidelines rather than your individual tastes, opinions, etc. In doing so, I would point you to the precedent already established, certainly with the State Museum project. Notice also, quoting your guidelines, it is critical to recognize that the guidelines expressly state that they are, quote, illustrative rather than prescriptive. They go on to say, quote, "The aim is to engender creative approaches and solutions within a workable framework rather than laying out details and rigid standards." I would cite for you, just for reference, 5.7 and 5.9 of your guidelines and conclude with this thought, Mr. Chairman. Throughout this process, we have worked collaboratively with staff, as I've already indicated, and we're led to believe that this redesign was in keeping with the guidelines, following the blowout of the window frame structures, the preserving of the concrete horizontal bars between the second and third floors, etc. And it was only on Tuesday, less than 48 hours ago, that we learned that staff apparently has recommended against approval. We've bent over backwards to seek mutual input. We feel that such input from the staff has been incorporated into this very design. And under 5.9.4, the section which is cited for you as the reason against approval by staff, is that the window placement is not in accordance. There is not one word in 5.9.4 that says that the removal of windows is inappropriate.
Sir?
Therefore, as I conclude, a number of folks, I'm finished, from First Presbyterian Church who are members of this community who are present with us today. I don't know that any of them have registered to speak, but have asked to be recognized by their presence, and I would ask them merely to stand as I conclude my remarks, unless there are any questions.
We thank you very much for your presentation. Very good.
And therefore, we ask that you issue a
And
certificate of compliance.
for the benefit of the record, those who are standing, are you all here in favor of this project? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone here in opposition to this project or the application as it has been presented? Very good. Is there any discussion by the commissioners or any comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to kick it off. Chuck, I think y'all have done an excellent job in trying to take some of the criticisms that we offered before and come back with a different solution. We appreciate that. We appreciate your remarks as well. I look at this as giving new life to an older building with a fresh look, much like he illustrated at the State Museum and others. So I'm very supportive of this idea. Now, Chuck, on the other hand, which design are we reviewing? You've showed us A and B. Should we make our comments about which one we prefer? Or are you going to try to decide and tell us? I guess before we vote, we've got to know what we're voting on.
We see the two as being the same conceptual outlay. They're really more differentiated by the detail level. And if you elect to approve this, we would suggest that we work that out at staff level on the details that still need to be developed.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Mr. Savory?
Yes, thank you. I would echo Ashby's compliments for your effort with what you've done. I have to say that I've struggled with this one a lot. And in reference, by the way, to the State Museum, as I'm sure you know, Chuck, I was principal in charge of that project. In that case, there were actually 3 protective overlays. It was on the National Register. It is protected by the City of Columbia. Historic Columbia Foundation holds an easement on it, so we were not allowed to alter any of the existing building. We did put glass in front of it, and if that were what you were proposing, I would be completely supportive of it. I am not supportive of the notion, and maybe I misunderstand the design intent, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not supportive of the notion of removing the masonry panels on that facade. I think that the design intent of the original building is very, very clear. If this were truly an addition, I would, and this is where I struggled, if this were truly an addition, I would have a different take on the interpretation of the guidelines, and it is our charge to interpret the guidelines. But I see this as projected glazing, projected window treatment. You know, in looking at section 5.9, staff has made some comments about that. It also goes on to say that in addition, renovation of structures of historic significance, not protected structures, but renovation of structures of historic significance should follow applicable city-adopted guidelines of historic landmarks. I think that there's no question in having, I've researched and I've lectured many times on mid-century modern architecture in Columbia. I spoke with the design architect about this particular building, as we discussed last time, and I think there is no question that if there were mid-century modern buildings in Columbia that were historically protected, this would be at the very, very top of the list for a number of reasons. And the facade at the second and third floor, the very, very restrained, really rationalist facade is a significant, very salient part of that design and is in counterpoint to what's going on the ground floor and the sort of whimsical mansard roof expression that is somewhat referential of other older buildings in the neighborhood. So to me, I wouldn't presume to speak for Phelps, but it seems clear as a practitioner and a student of modern mid-century architecture myself, what the design intent was, and I think that the guidelines do address it. So if I think this community wants to protect mid-century modern buildings, and they need to do it before it gets to the DDRC, because it makes a difficult conversation at best. But I do think that the guidelines support the notion of not removing those panels. I have personally no problem with the idea of the glass addition, but it's the removal of the midsection of the building, right in the front, in the middle, that for me is difficult. But that's my opinion, and other commissioners obviously don't necessarily agree with that point of view.
Let us have other commissioners, if they choose to render their thoughts, please, before we give you an option. Any other comments by the commission? Thoughts? Any further discussion?
I thought they did make a very good case as far as the new use of the old building, where it was somewhat of a fortress before. It was a more solid element on the second and third floors, and now it's got new life, it's got a new use, it's more open and transparent. And so I thought that was a good approach to the design changes.
I don't disagree with the argument in that respect, and as I said, I've struggled with this, but I think in the end, I need to cast my vote with staff recommendation, and I have a great deal of respect for the process that you've been through, Chuck. I know you've worked with them; they have said so carefully, and I enjoyed listening to you and looking at the imagery of your process. For me, it is just the removal of the panels of that building that I think are clearly very salient to the design intent, and I think that I know that the building has historic merit. If it were to be considered for historic protection, it would be the very top of the list for buildings of this era. So that's where my dilemma and my ultimate opinion comes from.
At this point, sir, our procedures usually do not allow for any further testimony. I'm going to, though, at this point, grant you a 1-minute response, if you will.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is simply to respond that we have carefully considered the things that you have pointed out, Tom, in particular. And our sense of it was that if we were to remove only a couple of brick panels, and literally it's 2 brick panels on each floor, that we could still retain the overall character of the building while creating a new addition. We don't see this as being a window replacement at all. This is a new addition to the building. It's creating a new entry, which we think is very important in terms of the character of the mosaic, the artwork. We're trying to really make the most out of this building. We've also proposed to keep the precast framing of the windows so that you truly read and understand where this building came from. And so we are also saving the brick so that if anything changes, we can rebuild what was there. So we're trying to be very faithful to the concerns that are being expressed.
Thank you very much.
Can I add one thing? Thank you.
Mr. Savory?
That if, depending on how this moves forward, I feel that the Scheme B is a more successful scheme because I think that it ties the materiality of this piece back to the original building more successfully than Scheme A, which seems to me to be a little bit foreign to the building.
Was the Scheme B the one with the translucent panels?
The one with the L shape. No, Scheme B is not the one that's showing right now. The other one.
Just the other one.
I agree with you.
And the other question I had, you mentioned saving the brick panels. How are you doing that? Just the bricks? Okay.
Okay. Mr. Gressa, did you have anything else to add?
No, I don't think so.
Any other commissioners? All right, I think at this point we'll ask for a motion. Is there a motion on this application as now moving forward after discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion that the commission grant approval for the conceptual design as presented on this project at 1400 Lady Street.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second, and a motion and a second for approval. Any further discussion? Would you call the roll for a vote, please?
Mr. Bachnight?
No.
Ms. Great?
No.
Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
No.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
The motion, it's tied.
Tied. Okay. At this point, we'll ask for an additional motion or a second motion on this matter. Would anyone like to present a second motion here? Mr. Gressett.
I don't have a second motion.
Okay. I think at this point, what we'll do is,
What are our options there?
well, we can either table it, we have a Scheme A, or we have a Scheme B. Those were two options that were presented in terms of the presentation. I think at this point, why don't we, in an effort to move this along, offer or ask for a motion on Scheme A? Sir, please, we're at a...
May I speak?
At this point, we're at a point of voting and offering a motion. We'll,
Just wanted to check.
Scheme A.
So,
which
Mr. Chairman,
was
may I ask this?
presented.
Tom said he was at least lukewarm on Scheme B. If we were leaning more toward Scheme B, would that be a remotion?
Here's something that would make me feel as though there was a chance that the original design could be put back intact at some future point, which is a principle of historic preservation. If the applicant were willing to take measures to what's the word, where you take components and you, not stockpile is the wrong word, but protect, pardon?
Just retain the
Well,
materials?
not retain, you place them in, safekeeping, put them, there's a term for it, I can't remember, but take the components that are being removed and place them in safe storage intact in order to be replaced in the future.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Savory. Mr. Gressett, would you like to offer a second motion?
I'll give it a try. Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we accept the design concept as presented conceptually by the applicant, with the caveat that we preserve certain elements as suggested by Mr. Savory.
Let's do this together. That the elements that are removed from the original facade be preserved and protected in perpetuity, and be kept in such a way that they could be reinstalled on the existing building.
Could we clarify, please, if we're talking about Scheme A or Scheme B?
B?
Scheme B.
Okay.
Is that confusing enough?
I think staff has recognized the full motion as it was presented by the two of you. We have a motion, and is there a second?
I'll second that.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Would you call the roll for a vote, please?
Mr. Bachnight,
Yes.
Mr. Gressett,
Yes.
Ms. Great,
No.
Mr. Cohn,
Yes.
Mr. Savory,
Yes?
Mr. Nguyen.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Would you please present the next case, please? Okay, our next case, please.
This is going to bring us to the item number 3 under the urban agenda, which is the site plan review for 1401 through 1431 Assembly Street and 1011 and 1019 Washington Street. TMS number is 09013-03, lot 01, and then 09013-03, lots 6 through 13. This project entails the construction of a 355,000 square foot, 15-story, 305-unit multifamily building on approximately 1 acre. The proposed multifamily building consists, the required number of parking spaces for the development is 593, whereas the applicant proposes to provide 151 within a parking garage and 183 on street. On Tuesday, July the 12th, the Board of Zoning Appeals granted a variance for the remaining 259 parking spaces that would be required. Though there are many staff comments within the case summary, the proposed site plan largely meets the requirements. There was a traffic impact study, which the city traffic engineer has reviewed and approved. Also, one of the conditions is that planning has requested that an additional information regarding pedestrian and bicycle traffic be provided to staff prior to the issuance of any permits to ensure that the increase in pedestrian and bicycle traffic be accommodated. And should the commission be inclined to grant the approval of the site plan, staff requests that the commission grant it subject to staff comments. Project is bounded on the by the library on the north. Have entrances to the garage on Washington Street as well as Assembly Street. And our applicant is present to explain their case.
Thank you, sir. The applicant like to come forward? State your name, and I do believe you were sworn in as well.
Yes,
sir.
I was.
Thanks.
My name is Robert Neely. I'm the architect for the project. And, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I think we met the application. There are, as was mentioned, there were a couple items that once the final engineering is completed for the project, we will submit that and review that with staff.
Okay. Yeah, this is for site plan approval at
Correct.
this time, right now. Thank you. Is there anyone here in opposition to the site plan application? Site plan alone. This is for the site plan only. Anyone here in opposition to the site plan or for approval?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes,
Sort of in the
sir.
process, as we talk about the site planning issues, and to me, this is more of a technical review that the city has made.
Correct.
And they feel comfortable with the different engineering components and departments. But next, we'll be reviewing the design approval. And how does one relate to the other? I mean, if we make comments on the design approval or not approval, will that affect what we approve on the site plan approval?
I do not believe it will, sir.
And it depends on how significant the changes are to the design portion of the building, that if they affect the site plan, depending on how they affect it, may require re-review of the site plan.
An additional question.
Yes.
Is removal of existing materials on site part of the site plan approval or the building review?
And you say existing materials, are you talking about the building?
Existing structures, parking, other features on the site. Is that part of site approval or is that part of building review?
That's actually not part of the review process. It doesn't fall within your regulatory purview.
Is that clear? Okay. Would you like to speak in reference to the site plan? Please, come forward. Have you been sworn in? Okay, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
I do.
Thank you. State your name, ma'am.
Robin Waits.
Hello, ma'am.
Hey. The Executive Director with Historic Columbia. I'm not sure if this is where I'm supposed to be speaking, but I would like to get it on record.
You're welcome.
Regardless.
Please.
So in the proposal before you, the discussion has centered on the new construction of the edge with little mention of the building that currently stands at the corner of 1401 Assembly Street. In the design guidelines for the city center in section 5.9.11 states, quote, demolition of existing buildings is strongly discouraged. However, in certain cases, existing buildings are not in character with their surroundings, nor are they functionally necessary. So clearly the guidelines discourage demolition. And while the context here is relatively sparse, the building at 1401 is in character with buildings to the south across Washington Street, the Columbia Electric Railway building, to the west, the North Carolina Mutual building, Nathaniel Frederick House, the Gregory Lilywood House, to the southwest, buildings that house the Simons Body Shop and the Pearson's Funeral Home. 1401 Assembly, along with these buildings, comprise what remains of the once thriving Black downtown. So demolishing this building, which would be necessary or an option in order to build the new structure, would further diminish the context, endangering the buildings that do remain and disregarding the story that these structures represent. At the DDRC information session in May, representatives from Clayco indicated that there were plans to relocate this building to a lot at the northwest corner of Park and Washington Streets. Historic Columbia is concerned about this option because in discussion with the staff at the City Preservation Office and the State Historic Preservation Office, relocation makes it very difficult to register buildings as historic. And without this designation, a building is not eligible for tax incentives that make rehabilitation attractive and affordable for developers. So in discussion actually earlier today with Mr. Russell Capelin with Clayco, I understand that they have an agreement with the library to acquire the aforementioned lot at Park and Washington Streets. They've secured bids on the relocation and stabilization, and if the project is approved, intend to move the building. So there's also been talk of the city being involved financially in the relocation. But a key phrase in all of these discussions has been, quote, "It is our intention." So if Clayco and the city are committed to the relocation of the structure, stating that intention is not enough. It should be made clear how the project will transpire, how the building will be redeveloped, who will bear the burden of the cost, and who will own the property. This body should not approve the project until it is certain that 1401 Assembly will not be demolished, as is noted in your guidelines, and all plans around the relocation of the structure are confirmed and approved.
Thank you, Ms. Waits. Is there anyone here else that would like to speak? Have you been sworn in?
I have, sir.
Please.
My name is Lydia Brandt. I teach architectural history at USC. The EDGE proposes to demolish a historic building significant to Columbia's history for a hulking structure that just could be as easily in Charlotte or Atlanta. Staff's recommendations call repeatedly for better articulation of materials and details, breaking up the building's overall mass, and rescaling of its base in order to better serve the city center guidelines. In particular, Guideline 5.3 indicates that the height and scale of new buildings should provide a sense of human scale and proportion. The proposed design does not do that. Why not incorporate the existing historic building into the proposed tower? This could be the unique solution this building clearly needs. It would tie the building to the street and address the corner, provide inspiration for detail, and retain human scale, in addition to a historic building. In fact, this developer has already employed this solution in a similar residential tower in St. Louis. Please consider denying or deferring this application based on scale, mass, and detail according to the guidelines, and I hope that the applicant will consider retaining the historic building as an opportunity to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Please. Have you been sworn in?
I have been,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Martha Fowler, and I and my partners own several historic properties on Main Street, and we have the great pleasure and responsibility, as well as the pain that goes along with restoring historic properties. Thankfully, the buildings that we own are set within the 1600 block of Main, and they're largely intact with the mid to late 19th and 20th century buildings. Many of the buildings retain a great deal of historic integrity, which makes them easily qualified for historic designation, and the context serves as a great basis for telling their story. Just a few blocks down Main Street towards the State House, you will notice that in the 14, 13, and 1200 blocks, the continuity of the historic buildings has been terribly interrupted. But new construction over the decades has established a rhythm that balances with the new and the old. For example, in 2004, the postmodern 17-story Meridian building incorporated the 1912 consolidated building into its facade. In 2014, First Citizens Bank completed a top-notch rehabilitation including the iconic Brennan Building, which sits nestled against their dynamic 9-story headquarters. Creative design coupled with the commitment to preserving local history led to the success of both instances. 1400 Assembly Street is a building that is no less important than Consolidated and Brennan. In fact, its location at the gateway of Columbia's Black downtown, and the fact that it is one of the fewer than 10 buildings remaining that were part of the early 20th century district make it even more significant. How we can complete the story if it is removed those places that speak to the diversity of our community, we just need to ask. Approving this new construction further diminishes the district and a story that is being erased. Others have found a way to meet the needs of the modern urban city without losing our past in the process. With this project, you have a chance to do the same.
Thank you very
for
much,
listening.
ma'am. Have you been sworn in? Okay, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. State your name.
My name is Jeanette Stroy, and I am the daughter of the former owner who operated a business out of the 1401 Assembly Street. My father was Joseph Stroy. I'll leave you with this and a little bit of history behind his shop there. I'm excited at the prospect of this building becoming a historical site for preservation, and more excited that more and more of our history and influence will be displayed and recorded in the history of Columbia, South Carolina, and Richland County. The project brings to mind that MSNBC News considers Stroy Barbershop a historical site. They spoke of it as a gathering place and interviewed the current staff during their visit to the capital city while covering the Democratic primary in March 2016. I do not know the history behind the other occupants of this building and what influence they had on the community, but I certainly can speak of my father, Joseph Stroy, farmer, barber, and the first elected black magistrate of Hopkins. My dad was a people person that always looked for the positive situation. He used the barbershop to help improve the status of blacks by listening to them, encouraging them, and emphasizing the need to vote as a way to improve their status in life. Individuals did not come to get their hair cut or just their shoes shined, but to get updated on current events and just to chew the fat, to get advice, and of course, discuss the Bible. Jobs were scarce during the 60s and 70s, especially for blacks. Dad would hire young men from our family and friends to work in the shop to earn money while in high school and college. He used that opportunity to nurture them, push them to be the best that they could be, and upstanding men of God. Finally, he fought for equal rights under the law for blacks all of his life. He ran successfully, numerously for the school board of Richland County, was president of the Democratic Party, and in his area for several years, worked with voter registration projects, and housed many college students for 2 summers to effectively carry out their goals, and was elected the first black magistrate of these efforts. He would have remained in the political arena, but politicians sometimes attract strange bedfellows, and to preserve his integrity, he got out. We would be happy to lend our support to the preservation of this project and that it remain on the site where it is now.
Thank you so very much, ma'am. Sir. Okay, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Chairman Nguyen, members of the DDRC, I'm Matt Kennel with the City Center Partnership, and I'd just like to say that I know we're just talking about the site plan today, but we are very supportive of the site plan approval, and I can also speak later to the design of the building. I know staff has been working very well with the developer for some time, and I think the end result is very positive. I recognize I'm a member of Historic Columbia. I do support their thoughts and many of the comments that have been made today about preserving the building in question on the corner. And I really like the idea. And I know I've talked to Mayor Benjamin, and he's talked about this. as well as the developers, the idea to relocate the building a block away seems to me to be a very good solution. That has been done in Columbia before. In fact, the Big Apple, which was moved with the Columbia Development Corporation and owned by Historic Columbia for many years, was moved as part of the revitalization of downtown Columbia some years ago, and that's been very successful. So I think we have a model for that, and I'd encourage consideration of the same type of relocation for this building and preservation so we can enjoy it for generations to come.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennel. Appreciate it. Would you like, you'd like to speak to the site plan or very good, sir. Have you been sworn in? Please.
My name is Jay Case. I am a principal with Clayco, the development company. I just want to, I'm here, Russ Capelin, who's presented to you before, is unable to attend. He's got a medical issue that prevents him from traveling, so I'm here in his stead. I just want to be clear on a couple of points. There have been ongoing discussions relative to the relocation of the building in question, and we've been supportive. In fact, that building had severe water damage, and we paid to put a roof on it in an attempt to preserve it for this kind of a discussion. But the reality is that we do not own the site where it would go, nor are we in a position to fully fund the removal. And we've had discussions with the mayor's office in this regard and continuing to have those discussions, as well as with the historic people. So we're certainly willing to contribute and participate in the process, but I just wanted to be clear that we are not fully in control. It's just, it's not wholly up to us to do. We need the cooperation of others. So I just want to make that point clear.
Thank you very much, sir. With staff, well, I'm going to ask staff to either correct me if I'm misspeaking or to add to what I may say here. We have before us the site plan. The site plan has been reviewed by other departments within the city, is that correct? And the purview of the DDRC does not include consideration nor decision based on current building location. Is that correct?
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Can you restate?
The purview of our decision here for site plan and as well as the design approval for new construction does not include consideration or motion based on the current building.
Your purview regarding what you have before you now is regarding the site plan.
Correct. I just
and the site as it
as it is presented here in the site plan. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to all of us here as we go into now any discussion. Is there anyone here?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Is there any way that we can, with the DDRC, be inclined to grant to go into recess so that staff can confer?
We can certainly do so. We'll call for a 10-minute recess. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will give everyone about 2 minutes to gather back in the room here. And then I will, if everyone is willing and ready, we'll ask for a motion to reconvene.
So move.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second to reconvene the meeting here at 5:30 in the evening on the 14th of July, DDRC. We are currently, I guess we've got a vote here. All those in favor of reconvening at this time, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask staff to let us know where we stand here.
Thank you for allowing that recess. Staff has convened, and you can proceed with the discussion and/or motion.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a moment to digress to present here to everyone, both on the commission and in the audience, where we stood. We had been at a point of discussion for a request for site plan approval for new construction at 1401, 1431 Assembly Street and 1011, 1019 Washington Street. We've had presentations by members of the public in opposition as well as in favor of the site plan approval, in particular items that are not truly within the purview of the DDRC relevant to an existing building. As we move forward, we're looking now for a discussion by the commission on site plan approval. Is there any? There being none, I'll ask now for a motion on the request for site plan approval for new construction.
Mr. Chair, based upon the information that staff presented to us and the items that are within our purview, I move to make a recommendation for site plan approval for new construction for 1401 through 1435 Assembly Street and 1011 through 1019 Washington Street, subject to staff's comments.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gray. We have a motion to approve the site plan. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would again sort of ask, just for clarification, as we talk about the site plan approval, we are looking at it on what's presented, the technical aspects of what's presented, and the recommendations by the city staff. However, as we get into the design approval, if there are significant changes in what's been presented, the applicant may have to come back with a reapplication of a new site plan. Is that true? Even if we approve what's been presented?
Staff has advised us, and
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Gressett. We have now a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Would you call the roll for a vote, please?
Mr. Bachnight?
No.
Ms. Great? Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Savory? Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. We have had now an approval for site plan for the new construction on Assembly Street and Washington Street. We'll move on now to the second of this particular project, which is a request for certificate of design approval for new construction. We have, I guess, the applicant here to present, or do we? Yes? Would you like to come forward, please? I know you've been sworn in. Please state your name again and speak into the mic.
My name is Robert Neely, and I'm the architect.
I'm sorry, sir. No, we'll have it presented to us, please, first.
Okay, case number 4 is 1401 Assembly. This is the same project. This is the request for a certificate of design approval for the new construction of a 15-story residential building in the City Center Design Development District. This proposal at the northwest corner of Assembly in Washington is for the development of a 15-story multifamily building with structured parking. The proposal includes moving the existing building 1 block to the west. The applicant came before the commission in May of 2016 with an informational presentation to gather feedback. Many of the recommendations here are consistent with the comments that were provided at that time. And I'll have the applicant come up and make a presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, you're more than welcome to join us one more time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Over the last 6 weeks, after presenting, we appreciated all the comments that we received from the committee. So we went back and we looked and refined the design. So I'd like to just present some of the highlights of that, and then just go back if there's any questions. I'd be happy to answer.
That'll be great. Thank you.
Again, I'm sure you're all familiar with the site, but just to put the context there, we're on the corner of Washington and Assembly, and we're right next to the library. And across the street is a law building, which just to point out is a single-story structure. So we're essentially between a one-story structure to the south, and then the library, which is a modern building just to the north, which is all concrete, just exposed, unfinished concrete, and curtain wall. Just a site plan showing how the building wraps around the site with a courtyard at level 2 facing the south. Just an aerial shot. The building height hasn't changed since we presented in May. So again, just sort of showing the massing and the height in context with the existing buildings within the neighborhood. I'll just go through the floor plans very quickly. We have 2 levels of parking. The lowest level is accessed off of Washington Street, just off the west corner of the building. This is the street level. This is at Assembly, and again, there's parking that's accessed off the north side of the building along Assembly Street. I also want to just mention, because there's some staff comments, and just to address why some of the design decisions were made. In particular, when it comes to the street front, I know there was a concern about, or the wish that there was more glazing, more street activity. What you see there where it says open to below, and I'll go back one slide, we need to provide significant electrical infrastructure, switchgear generators for the building. We've been in contact with the local electric company, so we've been working through different scenarios. And in terms of the scale of the equipment for the building, the electric company is requiring that the building, or all the equipment has direct access from the street. To the west of our building is a parking lot which is currently owned by the library, and that's very essential to their customer. So that blocks our access there. Obviously, Assembly Street is a main street, and it just makes no sense to have any of the electrical equipment there. So really, as we sort of narrowed down what our options were, it really came down to Washington Street. So it's really a function of working with the utilities that brought us to that conclusion. On this slide, I also wanted to just point out that we, from the beginning of the project almost, we've been working with the library, with Melanie Huggins, and what we've, as part of this development, we recognized that they were sort of landlocked in terms of providing customer, or as Melanie describes it, their customer, the community, from getting from the parking lot. Currently, they have to walk all the way around Washington because there's no access into their building, into the lower level, which is currently the Children's Museum, or Children's Library. So we're working with the library to create easements so they have access to the space. So everything in the light green that you can see, that would be an easement that we'd be agreeing to in place with the library so that they can create a plaza and create better connectivity to their building. back to level 1. So the entry to our building, it's still on the corner. That hasn't changed with the main access right on the corner on Assembly Street. I'll go through them quickly, get to more interesting drawings. This is the amenity deck at level 2. This is a typical floor plan of the building. And this is the start of the new renderings. So based on the comments previously, there was some concern about the streetscape and the scale. And I hope this rendering shows, and unfortunately, on the left side of the slide, I don't show the existing attorney's building just because it would have obscured the view of our building. But we're sort of bridging over. So we have the one-story along Washington Street. But actually, the building, the site slopes considerably. So at the east side of Washington, just left of the 15-story tower, that wall is 18 feet tall. And the site falls. So by the time it gets to the west edge of the building, it's nearly 27 feet tall. So in a sense, I know that there's a desire to have a two-story building. The actual scale of that street wall elevation is actually quite significant. Then we also have the trellis element on top of that, which gives it additional, in our mind, architectural detail and additional visual lift. Here after the comments last time, we also went back and we started playing with the glazing on the corner, and we refined that design so that the second floor, the density of that, we reduced that so that we could bring the curtain wall glazing up higher. Again, just trying to make the entry more lighter, more inviting, and just animating the street more. We're also articulating the brick. So on the horizontal bands for levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can start to see every other course, there's a reveal. And so it starts to create a greater texture in terms of the shadow line and the texture of the building. We're also, we went back and we started to articulate the architectural precast panels, which are the gray panels that are just next to the glazing. This is from the Washington Street at the west corner of the building. And again, I think this slide starts to show a little bit of how the brick is detailed with the relief to give it some texture. And I think you also get a sense of scale with just the people and the entourage that are in the image showing the scale of the building. In terms of, it really, in my opinion, reads as a two-story structure in terms of its scale. And again, here are the elevations, just sort of showing the scale in a more objective way. One of the things we did, and of course all the mechanical we're putting on the roof of the building, and that'll all be screened. One of the things about having, again, a significant amount of electrical equipment, service equipment to fuel the building, by bringing it inside, not that we had room on the outside, we're really sort of keeping the streetscape on all four sides of the perimeter clear, and so it's either pedestrian walkway or it's plaza, which is the case between us and the library. These are just some diagrams just showing the percentage of glazing versus solid. I know in the staff report, it talks about the percentage of glazing that's on the street level. I think those numbers, and while they are true, those are the numbers that we calculated. I think they're skewed a little bit just because, again, going back to some of the metal screening that we had to provide there for all the service equipment, it prevents us from using glazing for obvious reasons. So it's not that we weren't interested in maximizing the glazing, we were. It was more of a pragmatic decision. And then just a couple shots. So we have two colors of brick, stucco along the north elevation, and then we have window wall and curtain wall. And added some of the details just to start to show the depth and the recess characteristics of the windows. So I guess I'll just go back to the rendering, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, sir. Is there anyone here who would like to speak now? We're at a point of certificate of design approval. So anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to what has been presented in that regard or in support of? Is there any discussion then by the commission? Any comments? Or, I'm sorry, sir, would you? Have you been sworn in? Okay, would you raise your right hand, please, and then state your name?
Steve Henson.
Do you swear to tell the truth in these proceedings?
I do.
Thank you very much. Proceed.
I'm really, in a way, don't have a dog in this fight. I'm a resident of Vista, you know, and a proud citizen of Columbia, I guess I'd say. And Bart, my friend Bart, asked me to come and look because they were talking about the historic building. And so I went on the website, and I guess I'm late in the process or whatever, but just looking at this thing, printed this off and started reading it, and at first it says, you know, they're going to build a development of a 15-story building at the corner of Washington and Assembly, so that sounds good. And then I go on the first page, and it says, buildings are supposed to be compatible with surrounding buildings in terms of mass, scale, and height. And then I look down here, it says, height and scale of new buildings within the city center should complement existing structures while providing a sense of human scale and proportion. Then I went and got my reading glasses and went and looked again. And to me, I mean, regardless of what the bricks look like and what the design is, you know, you look at the buildings surrounding there, you got the Nathaniel Frederick House, you got the Big Apple, which is one of my favorite buildings in Columbia, and of course the library. And I just don't see how 15 stories meets those requirements. It doesn't matter what the building looks like. It could be a beautiful building, but still 15 stories compared to, I guess, 3 for the library and a couple for the other buildings just seems completely out of scale. And if you look that whole side of Assembly, other than, I guess, the Strom Thurmond Federal Building, nothing is a high-rise. And, of course, the federal building, what are you going to do? That's the feds, you know. But anyway, that's just what I think, you know. And I used to live in Boston. I went to school in Boston, and you look at the old State House, and it's surrounded by 2 60-story buildings. And we've escaped that in Columbia, and I think that, so that's my comment. I just think it's just way too big regardless of what it looks like.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Sir. Mr. Yes.
Members of the DRC, I'd just like to reiterate the point that I made earlier, that this has been a long process.
Kennel again. I thought you would state your name. I was
I'm
about
sorry.
to, but just for the record,
I
Mr. Matt Kennel.
I thought I did. I'm sorry, Chairman.
That's okay.
It's Matt Kennel with the City Center Partnership. I
Right.
just wanted to say that I wanted to compliment again the DDRC, the staff, and the developer to work together to come up with a much better and much better looking, better scale. They articulated the ground floor, the corner, much better than the original proposal, and it's really, to me, just an example of how the DDRC is supposed to work. I also just wanted to address the question of height, because if you go across Assembly Street to the east, which you really don't see on this drawing, you do have buildings of similar scale, just hundreds of feet, just a few hundred feet away. And as you can look at the downtown skyline, it's very typical as we look at Columbia to have 3-story buildings next to 15 or 20-story buildings. That's the way our downtown business district has developed, and I think it's entirely appropriate. So I just wanted to say that I congratulate everybody for working on this, and hope that it'll be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Kennel. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak in opposition or in approval of the presentation? Sir? No? Yes, please. Well, we've got one and then another. Yes, come forward, please. Have you been sworn in? Okay, raise your right hand. And do you swear to or affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
I do.
Thank you very much. State your name.
Reginald Randolph.
Thank you, sir.
Building, the facades you're talking about removing for this building, I kind of like worked in that building, the old barbershop, one of those persons. In removing that building, those bricks are very fragile. What are you proposing as far as damage coming to the building when moving it?
Well, you're
Nothing been said about that. And I feel like it could have been that building, that design is modern. It looks nice, but as far as you're trying to keep the historic, it's about the facades in that area. It would have been a way that you can incorporate that existing building on that corner. And you're just changing it. Excuse me, a little nervous. You're just changing the structure of downtown Columbia for the best, better or worse, however you want to say it. I'd like to see it incorporated into maybe the design itself. It's bricks, old school bricks. Just my input.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. I believe we have one other person.
Could we also just remind everybody, if they didn't sign in, to please do that so that we can get the minutes
Oh,
accurate?
thank you very much, yes. If there's anyone who has spoken or is yet to speak, who wants to speak, please sign the roster at the side of the podium here, just to the left of it. Have you been sworn in, sir? Okay, so when you're done there, we'll have you raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
Yes.
Thank you very much. State your name and
My
have
name
a
is
go.
Anthony Fike. I'm a Columbia resident, and I just wanted to offer my support of this project. For myself, I actually live in the Harbison area, so I can't say that I'm a City of Columbia resident, but one of the reasons I don't live in the city is that there aren't, in my opinion, a lot of options available for the public. For the students, yes. For people like myself, a young professional who wants to call the City of Columbia home, I wholeheartedly support this. We are a capital city, and as somebody myself, I travel from Charlotte, Atlanta, and I absolutely love Columbia, but I think this is a good step forward for our city. So I appreciate, the historic aspect of the city, but we have to have progression, and I think, vertical development is a way to get us there.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak? We are going to now ask for any rebuttal. Is there by the applicant? No? Okay. So in that case, we'll move on to discussion by the commissioners. Anyone?
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to kick this off a little bit, maybe for discussion by some of my fellow members. The excitement of this project, I think, is admirable. I think it's an exciting project. I think the scale is appropriate to the downtown central business district. The height doesn't bother me. But I think it is within our review to talk about the articulation of the tower, the base of the tower, the interest of the tower, the texture of the tower, things like that, which I don't think they've quite addressed to my satisfaction yet. And secondly, I find it a little unusual that the staff has made some 6 recommendations about the design that we're not seeing yet. And some of these are fairly major, as it talks about the height of the base and different things like that. So I think my position is I would like to see their design team come back to better address some of these issues that the staff has, that it would be a more meaningful presentation. I think that I'm ill-prepared to vote either way right now. If I had to vote now, I would say no, because I don't think these things have been shown and satisfied to my satisfaction. I also will throw in that perhaps with a little bit more study, maybe some more imaginative solutions might be offered, even to the extent of incorporating the old historic building. But we're not here to design the building for them, but that might be a possibility.
Anyone else? Mr. Savory?
Now, I would agree with Mr. Gressett's comments, generally speaking. I think that there's a level of detail that we would expect to see certainly with a project of this significance and size. I would also agree that it's a very exciting project, and I concur with the sentiments of many of the people's testimonials that we've seen today about this building. My feeling is that the basic moves, for the most part, are about right, the way that the corners have been addressed and the decisions about what's primary and what's secondary. But I agree completely with Ashby's comments about many of these staff comments that have not been addressed that I think I would need to see addressed. You see in the longer staff comments a lot of language that's taken from the guidelines referring to long, blank, articulated street wall facades, monolithic street wall facades, large, unbroken facade surfaces should be avoided, and so forth. And while I think that there is some of the detail we see, for instance, with the recesses at the masonry, that is very encouraging to me, I think that we are missing some of that detail. I'm still concerned, and I think I mentioned this when we had the courtesy review about this north facade that is just extremely monolithic. And with regard to the Washington Street side, you referred to the one-story building, but that should be the anomaly as the neighborhood grows, not the scale that the new buildings relate to. And it's very clearly stated in the design guidelines that one-story components are discouraged. It is true when you move to the west that the west facade ends up being essentially 2 stories, but when you go to what will be the more important pedestrian corner, it becomes a 1-story facade, and that to me is troublesome. It looks, if you were just to look at the building from a massing standpoint and how you have struck the line at the 4th story, that would be a natural place to expect to see that west facade line strike. I'm not suggesting that, not to approve it unless that west facade is 4 stories high. I'm just saying that I think more mass on that side would be appropriate, and it would also help mask the inside of that, the leg of that C shape, which again, to me, I have some of the same concerns about that face, being the south face, as I have about the north face of the building, with that broad expanse of stucco, which looks as if it'll be very planar without very much relief. So I think that that said, I applaud the project. I'm excited about the project. I think that the moves that are being made in the right places, and the hierarchy is about right. But those things, and having a better understanding of how the street will be animated and it will be addressed for pedestrians, I think is critical. So I would agree with Ashby, more detail and addressing some of these aspects to give some relief to the monolithic aspect of some of these facades.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Because two other board members have said this well, I will only reference staff's comments on 5.3.2 regarding the relationship of height and width to existing facades. And staff's comment is, in the first sentence, the large scale and verticality of the building would benefit from breaking up the mass in some way, particularly in how it relates to adjacent buildings. I feel like that's lacking considerably in this current iteration.
Thank you, sir. And I will add my comment to Mr. Gressett and Mr. Savory, especially Mr. Savory's regarding the west facade and that 1-story inset area. I agree that we should really see a little more height there, and that the trellis on top of it, or that presents here, it appears is still not recessed, as it would still be visible from the street. I think that that is an important element too in the design that we'd like to see a change in. Is there any other comment from anyone else?
I would like to just, I guess, a general comment and a question as well. I know we're talking about a lot of the items that have not been met per staff's recommendations that they've presented, but we don't always get applicants that have already addressed all of the comments. A lot of times we make that as part of our motion for them to incorporate the staff's comments or their recommendations. Is it because of the extent of these items that are still outstanding for the reason as to why a visual is preferred?
To answer your question, the comments, including mine, that have been just now presented are simply that, the comments that we'd like to see or that we have. There is certainly no reason that a motion could not be put forward here suggesting that changes be deferred to staff as necessary or as recommendations through the motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
My concern is that the recommendations for changes would be substantial enough that we would want to see the outcome of those changes.
I agree with that.
Very good. Staff also agrees there. Very good. Okay. There's the answer you're asking.
I just wanted to be clear because I know there are a lot of times we make motions and there are items that are already presented before us, and for us to not issue a motion that may, incorporate them following staff's recommendations. I just wanted to be clear as to why.
Understood. Understood. Absolutely.
I would say that I feel optimistic that most of these issues can be addressed. I'm excited and optimistic about it moving forward, but I think that there are two aspects to it. One is that it is, as Ashby said, a fairly long list, and as John said, I think puts too much burden on staff to make those interpretations, combined with the fact that this is a very, very high-profile, very large building. I think, in my experience on DDRC, we've asked the same of other applicants to come back and provide more details. So that seems consistent to me and to be expected.
Very good. Therefore, we'd like a motion. Mr.
A little
Gresser.
more, since we seem to be heading in the same direction, would we be looking at a motion to defer or to deny approval? It's about the same thing.
We would have to provide a motion to deny the approval at this time.
Based on those things.
I think you could make a motion to, is it called, postpone the approval till the next meeting and ask that they address
Defer.
the comments.
Deferral.
It's essentially the same as a deferral.
Essentially the same.
One sounds a little better than the other.
A question in that regard, would deferring a decision until the next meeting accelerate the process by which they can submit for approval? Meaning, they may have already missed a deadline to resubmit for the next meeting. If we defer it, can they come back in the next meeting with changes made, or are we automatically looking at 2 months anyway?
We haven't sent the ad yet, so it could potentially be on the agenda. I guess it would be just a matter of how much time they need to revise their drawings, which, we would definitely need a week or two in advance of the next meeting. So, that might be.
Well, the precedent has also been set before that we have had work sessions that could help adjust or accelerate that. Would that be another option that commissioners would be willing to agree to?
Yeah, but we don't have to exactly put that in a motion, right? It's just whatever.
Well, we need to move this forward from this meeting on, so what we would need to do is, yes, we have put it into a motion at previous points.
To defer, but not to defer to a future meeting or work session. It doesn't matter which.
We would need to defer it to the work session itself.
Could you repeat that?
That was our discussion. We're about to put a motion forward. I will make that motion. We will make a motion that we defer this to a work session with the applicants and their cohorts to address significant concerns of design that exist at this time and to work further with staff.
I'll second that.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that? Would you call the roll and we'll take a vote?
Mr. Bachnight?
Yes.
Ms. Great?
Yes.
Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes. Very good. We will now have the next case presented, please, which is 601-603 Saluda Avenue.
I'm going to recuse myself. It's my neighborhood.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, I keep going like this.
We've got a new, or part of the historic agenda, part of the agenda is 601-603 Saluda Avenue. Request for certificate of design approval for demolition in the Wales Garden Architectural Conservation District.
We do. This is a rather unique situation, which has resulted in a request from the City of Columbia for the demolition of a duplex building based both upon its structural condition and its impact on the accessibility needed for a stormwater project. There's a great deal of erosion happening behind this row of duplexes, and the duplex in question is actually a it's actually a compromised building already, hence the request to demolish this building in order to have access to the backyard where the erosion is happening and down into, I guess it's a drainage pond. We have Dana Higgins from the city's engineering department here to talk about those issues and the challenges they're facing. Y'all do have a site plan, I believe. I think it's before. I think it is. There it is. So if Ms. Higgins will come up and just discuss the project at hand.
Good evening. I'm
Good
Dana.
evening. And I don't think you've been sworn in yet.
Okay.
Would you raise your right hand, please? And do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
Yes, I do.
Very good. Welcome.
Thanks. So the city has purchased this property. There's a large erosion problem behind these 3 units. We have an access problem. I don't know if y'all have been over to this property, but it was already eroding. It's a convergence of 3 storm conveyances. 2 of them are the tunnels that go through 5 Points. So, and you can kind of see them on the site plan. That's okay. So you have a 72-inch that is coming down Waccamaw and continues through the 601 and 603 unit and the 547 and 549. Can they see these? Okay.
Not yet.
There is a sheet piling with a dead man holding the sheet piling in place in the slope, and dead man came loose out of the slope as the soil started eroding. So
That's a construction term, I hope.
yes, it
Okay.
makes the sheet pile stay in place. So the erosion started occurring, the sheet piling came down, and then, of course, when the flood came, it started eroding even more. We would like to go in and fix this because it's part of Rocky Branch. And to get the equipment back there, we have overhead power. And when we looked at these 3 units, the 601 to 603 had severe structural issues. So we would really like to use as an access to fix the erosion problem.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions? Or is there anyone here who would like to present in opposition or in favor of this project?
I guess this is a question, maybe somewhat of an engineering question.
Sure.
But have y'all exhausted all of the reasonable fixes to try to get it fixed? To me, the 3-building composition has a certain very nice presentation. And if we take one of the buildings away, it might be like, missing a tooth in your smile. So I was just wanted to have some assurance that, yes, we have tried everything we can think of.
Absolutely.
It would be astronomically expensive to try to solve the problem some other way other than tearing the building down.
It would be expensive and timely to have access. There is one alleyway that comes down from the cleaners, or it used to be the cleaners off of Blossom Street, but it goes behind residential units, and we feel pretty confident they would not like construction equipment coming back there. But as far as permanently demo, we're working with the neighborhood on how to redevelop this, so it could be something rebuilt. We don't know yet because we've kind of reached out to the neighborhood to see what they want to see up here.
And we do have Mr. Chow here. I feel like I need to do this so y'all can hear me. We do have Mr. Chow here to talk about the structural problems with the building. The city commissioned a real report.
Very good. Mr. Chow, step forward. How are you, sir?
Very good. How are you doing?
Have you been sworn in?
No, sir.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. Go right ahead.
Okay, this is... Well, I'm a little bit challenged by height. So. Okay, this house was built, in question, which one is the one with the arrowhead pointing down on the slide number 1. The house was built circa 1935. So at present, the house is about 80 years old. Like many of the 80-year-old house, the interior part of this house has significant interior cracks on the walls, on the ceilings, and also none of the floor are even. It's all, all different, so different direction. But unlike most of the 80 years old house, all those, the cracking and the unlevel floor are caused by structural issues, not just the typical aging of the house. This house typically suffers 2 major types of structural deficiency. One external, that's caused by the foundation settlement, which is based on the soil around the house is settling and causing the problem. And second part is the internal problem, which is inherited by the inadequate construction during the construction of this building. So we have 2 of those major type of problem. If you look at on slide number 2, all the corner of the house have those wraparound windows, and every single one of them, you can see the textbook example, stair step type cracking at the corner, which is pointing out to right at the corner of the building is settled. And those settlements are attributed to because of the foundation settlement. Now, the whole rear side of the building has also, across the board, significant settlement. When I say significant, you'll be about 2 to 3 inches out of a level of the settlement. And because of the wrap-around windows, and that is causing additional problem, the foundation settlement causing that corner to settle. But we don't believe this window was original construction. The original construction would be the window, the single pane window, and I think later on, maybe the owner tried to doing the wraparound. And because of that, all those, the lintel supporting the window is not properly installed. There's no structural support at there. So only thing we are holding there is right at the corner, the window of the post of the window itself, and to handle that corner. So it is, really a very significant compromise on the structure. And also, if you go to the real side, and this is on the side number 3, that's the real side, you can see that is the most significant part of the problem, because the whole real side has a significant settlement. On this particular corner, you can see the different iteration of the settlement. So this thing has been ongoing since earlier stage, and that's been settled, leaning, and being repaired, and it continues to settle. It's being repaired and settled again. So right now, at the top of the bottom of the window to the top of the ground, the whole thing leaning out more than 2 inches. And so this is definitely the strongest weakness of this building. And if you look at on the slide number 4, you can see the same thing. They probably cannot see that, but where the arrowhead point at, you can see the steel step type of cracking. This is another textbook example, indicate the foundation settlement right at the corner. And if you look at the inside, when I see the most severe one, you can see the pier actually is leaning. And if you go to the inside, which is slide number 6, you can see the top of the window. You can see on the left-hand side, the space is a whole lot more smaller. Go to the right side, it's become more deeper. So that means the whole lintel is actually sloped. And also, they point out to the sloping right at the corner. And so that's also an indication of this is ongoing problem for a long period of time. And also, they can see when you walk in the building, the first half of the building, the floor is relatively flat. When I say relative, it's still uneven, but relatively flat. But after they pass half point, the whole floor significantly sloping down toward the end. And when I say significant, you can see we put a level on that. You can the sloping on the 4-foot level is about 3/4 inch to about 1 inch. And as you know, the current building code will be only approval of sloping floor of 1/4 inch out of 4-foot level. We are 3 times beyond that. So this is very, very significant. As long as you walk half of the whole thing sloping down. Not only that, you can see all the floor is generally the no discrimination, everything sloping to the back. And this is something you're looking on the first floor, you're looking up. All the ceiling has a significant parallel crack. It's all parallel to the back. So this is also we are causing by the whole back wall settled. And of course, all the corner, you can see all those cracking there. Even above the door and the corner of the door, they all has a diagonal crack. This all showing that we have a localized structural problem on the second floor. And this is the second floor bathroom. You can see the whole tile have a significant parallel crack toward the back. So you have they keep on breaking toward the back, and you can see the bathtub on the bottom right corner, even the whole thing is being tear off the wall.
Well,
So
thank you, sir, very much. I think we've got a good understanding of where the problems are.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. From both you and Ms. Higgins, thank you very much.
Could we hear from staff maybe about this building, its contributing factor to the neighborhood, and whether that would be still maintained or whether we could lose this building and still have the integrity of that stretch?
Well, there are several buildings adjacent that are pretty close duplicates of this building, so we're not losing a unique building. It does contribute, it sort of tells the story of how that area has been used over time, but there are adjacent buildings, so we don't lose that story there completely. I do think how the process moves forward in terms of fixing this and what goes in its place is crucially important. So, you know, these all have about the same size. They have very similar building styles, and so that's going to have to be considered very carefully as they move forward. And typically we would require that information before moving forward with the demolition request, but because of the urgency of the repairs that are needed on this project, we went ahead, since discussions are still ongoing with the neighborhood on this, we went ahead and brought it forward.
It's my understanding that the city owns this property. Does it own the adjacent two properties or just this one building?
Well, there are 3 duplexes on this one parcel.
Right.
And, you know, the city is not interested in retaining ownership for a long period of time on this, but they would like to do the right thing, get the project fixed, and then make sure that whatever happens there, it supports the neighborhood.
I just feel a little funny sometimes cutting the city a break that we would not a private property owner. I mean, we make some people jump through hoops to get things fixed, and all of a sudden, you know, it seems a little easier tonight.
Well, I agree with you, which is why we did ask for a complete structural report on this building, costs associated with it, and asked Ms. Higgins to be here to speak about the erosion that's happening behind it.
For the sake of just a quick discussion, in response to your concerns, Mr. Gressett, and I'm going to ask of Ms. Higgins to maybe further my thoughts here. This isn't really a matter of giving the city a break. The Rocky Branch problem is a pretty heavy burden to many neighborhoods, not just this one. And it is a public safety issue. It is a public health issue, even in my mind, and it exceeds even the other homes within this neighborhood contiguous to it are at risk if repairs are not made. So this is, the magnitude of the problem is something that can even increase, if I'm not mistaken, if the repairs.
It already has.
So this is significant in that regard. Any further discussions?
I would simply like to echo my concern that, and I understand the utility aspect and the necessity of the project, but I would reiterate and echo the concern that from our perspective, from the board's perspective, we have rejected demolition permits for projects that are equally structurally damaged and equally financially challenged in their repair necessity. So while I understand that there are extenuating circumstances, it does give me pause, and I would like to see some sort of effort that the city would meet the same requirements in some shape or form for what goes back.
This ongoing maintenance there, are we going to have enough room, do you think, between buildings to maintain that? Yeah.
We also have a problem with continued maintenance of that area. Do you have a picture of what it looks like back there?
Yeah. It was.
If y'all, I'm sure y'all probably haven't been back there, but.
And our screens are not working up here, so we're having to turn around and
Oh,
kind of
no.
follow it that way too. So.
Is that the only, we have another one, don't we?
They're not in this. They were in your packets.
Yeah.
and
We
y'all-
saw them in the packet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a very large area where all those, like the very large tunnels from Five Points comes in, and it is, it's going to be something that we're going to have to maintain in perpetuality, obviously, because this happened, and not until Miss Edens was ready to sell the property did we even know that this was a problem, so she brought it to us.
There are a number of property owners who own land adjacent to the creeks and rivers that run through Columbia, and they're responsible for their own maintenance of their own creek back. And so when the city bought this, they bought the problem in addition to the problem they already had. And so again, we're being asked as a board to approve something we would not do for a private citizen because we would expect them to maintain their problem before it became an issue.
Yeah, it's pretty significant amount of convergence of the creeks, I guess. And there was contention of us continuing to maintain, but we do have an existing 72-inch. So we are, as you would say, on the hook to go to make sure that area stays safe. But you're right, most property owners have to maintain their areas unless we have an easement on it. And that's not that often.
And I would like to mention that the structural report that the city commissioned did include interior inspection, exterior inspection, looking in the attic, going underneath, doing a very thorough job in a way that we have not seen in many of our demolition requests, as well as professional estimates on what it would cost to repair the damage.
Was that estimate in our packet? I apologize if it was there.
All right, we thank you, Ms. Higgins. And I believe we're at the point where I'm going to ask for a motion on this application for demolition.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we grant the demolition of the property at 601 through 603 Saluda Avenue, based on the recommendation of staff and based on the observation that this may be a public health and safety issue, and that by losing one apartment, it does not ruin the neighborhood.
Is there a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Would you call the roll, please, for a vote?
Mr. Bachnight?
Yes.
Ms. Great?
Yes.
Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
No.
Mr. Savory?
It's recused.
Recused. Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
And let me just note, too, that anything that gets rebuilt there will be coming before y'all for review.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Would you like him to attempt to restart the iPads, or would you like to continue to try to use the screen behind?
We can go ahead and use the screen. We have one last case, right? Correct?
Yes, but then we also have our Westerville plan.
That's true.
You can look at your paper.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and have him come in and redo the screen or the pads?
Okay.
I did. What is she?
We've asked homeowners to put in 2 and 3 times that much.
I asked. Yeah, nobody came forward. So. Is she questioning that still over there? She questioned me. I did ask. Yeah.
Show us how that's done.
All right. Moving along, please.
right.
It's
The
you'll
next,
present the next case.
the next case is 1317 Geiger Avenue. Jeff Session is the homeowner. This is in the Cottontown Architectural Conservation District. It's a request for a certificate of a design approval for an exterior change. So this is the house. It's a 1925 bungalow-style single-family home. It's a contributing structure in the neighborhood. It has a side gable roof, which engages to cover the full-width front porch. As you can see, it has a small dormer centrally located, and the proposal is to remove the dormer and to, if you will, scoop out the roof and construct a larger dormer, thank you, in its place. This would allow for basically a second-story bedroom and bath on the bungalow. Staff is recommending for denial on this because we are going to lose original material, the original dormer roof, which is it's an important feature on the building. The original roof also would have to be scooped out to allow for the larger dormer, which is not a feature that you find in the neighborhood. And of course, the size of the dormer is large enough to cause us some concern. Jeff Lewis is the architect for the homeowner. I believe he's here, still here. And he is here to answer any questions about the project.
Thank you, ma'am. Step forward, sir. Have you been sworn in? Okay, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
I do.
Very good. State your name and go ahead.
My name is Jeff Lewis. Jeff Sessions, who's my client, he asked me to come and take a look. He wanted to add on a bedroom to his house, existing bungalow on Geeger Street. In this area, we have a situation where, we can't go either side. He has a garage in the back that's very close to the back side of the house, and we cannot expand on the back side. He had asked if we could possibly go up. I said, well, we figured out a way to get to the second floor, and where that existing dormer is right now, it's an attic. It's like a small enclosed attic. We looked around the neighborhood, even next door, and saw almost the exact same situation as I've designed, and tried to stay within the character of the neighborhood. We had to increase the size of the dormer in order to get to the correct size of the bedroom. If you go to my plans, my elevation, the reason why we have a little situation here with the roof on front of the windows is because we're bringing the exterior wall of that second floor down right on top of the existing wall of the house, okay? And we also have egress. We have to maintain egress out of a bedroom. Now, we have a situation, what we did was we tried to slowly slope down to the regular, right in front of those windows. We could always close that up some, have a little flatter area. We can do that, and that's not a problem. These were all preliminary plans when I first discussed this with Amy and Amy Moore, and then I designed the design, sent them in. There was no real discussion. If there were discussion, if there were problems with that, I would have made changes to accommodate the staff. But there were some comments about the proposed siding. I had proposed a cement board siding. What is on the house right now is vinyl. Okay, I figured any step up from vinyl would be cement board siding. If I needed to, I can go back to what was probably existing on the house, which would be wood. That's not a problem. We can do that very simply. I tried not to go too high. In fact, on the side walls, I have the second floor. I have a 7-foot 6-inch wall height. Okay, so we're trying to keep it low and try not to overwhelm the structure or the neighborhood. We've tried to stay within the context of the neighborhood, and hopefully y'all can see that we've done that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any questions of The applicant, or Mr. Lewis?
I just had one quick question, which is that the side elevations, it appears as though the gable on the addition is much higher relative to the crossing gable than it is on the front elevation. And it doesn't look like it's the same.
Don't know why.
Well, it looks like,
I understand. I see it. Yeah,
Which one is more accurate?
And if you look at that, this is probably about, and we go back to the other elevation, it's about the same. I don't think it's any different. It's just.
Well, it looks like it's about a 50-50 split
if
on
you,
the front
if you
elevation.
look on the from the gable right there, I would say it's probably about 2.5 feet above.
Okay.
And if you go to a front elevation, it's probably about 2.5 feet above.
Okay. I guess
So-
it's an optical illusion then.
I think so.
Might be.
Well, I'll blame it on Revit.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition or in favor of this application? That being the case, is there any further discussion or any further questions or comments by the commission?
I'll throw this part in. I actually think that Jeff has done a good job and has improved the looks of the house. I feel that this gable is so much more in scale and proportion to the house, much like one or two of the examples showing the neighbor's house. I think one on Confederate maybe, or something like that, one of the slides that illustrated the one on the upper right-hand corner. That seems to be about the same scale and presentation that Jeff is proposing, so I actually think he's made an improvement. The modified slope, the lower slope that you needed to cut out because of the code reasons, I think that's okay. I mean, it's a little quirky, but every now and then you get that on a house, so.
If I might, removing original features from a structure sets a difficult precedent for staff to work with when working with other homeowners.
Sure.
So you would need to, if you wanted to remove original features, there would need to be an exceptional reason for that in order for us to find that
Okay.
part of a defensible line of reasoning for the neighborhood.
Is that a requirement for head height?
Yes, we have a requirement. You know, well, you have to be able to get into the space. We did.
Okay.
What we did try to keep the upstairs as minimal as possible, and we do have a 7'6" height on the end walls, and you need at least 6'8" to get into a room. That's the bottom of the door, the top of the door. Plus you have structure. Plus you have structure. So that's about as minimal as I get. I can possibly come down a couple more inches. That's about it.
I agree with Ashby that just from an aesthetic standpoint, it looks good. I guess my question has more, I think there was more to the staff comments than what was just presented a moment ago. And I'm trying to get, excuse me, a clear understanding of what the neighborhood obviously voted to have this district, and so there are certain expectations that neighbors presumably have about what will happen in the neighborhood. And I'm just trying to understand. I think as a design, you know, if it were, for instance, in my neighborhood, which is not protected, it wouldn't even come up. So I'm trying to understand,
Sure.
you know, what the ramifications are, other than just setting a bad precedent for you. With future applicants, I think you had some specific things, and I am not saying, you know, whether or not I'm inclined to approve it. I just think that for the point of discussion of the commissioners to understand how what we're voting on. If you could elaborate a little bit more about what the concerns are.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm happy to do that. I would say the primary ones were that on the guidelines under additions, which this is a pretty large addition, if you will, we have, oh, I'm sorry, I can't get quite low enough. The guideline is to cite additions so they don't detract from or obstruct important architectural features of the existing building or others around it, especially the principal facade. So removal of the original dormer is a large obstruction, if you will, or removal of an original feature, which we would not ever encourage when someone builds an addition. We work very hard to make sure that additions, usually they're off the back of a building and inset just a little bit so the house continues to read as it did originally. The other, number 3 under additions and guidelines was that to limit the size and scale of the addition so that the integrity of the original structure is not compromised. And our reading of that is that, I mean, we understand why they want the dormer that large and that it would help with the interior space, but the fact that you have to dig out in front of it, that you're trying to make it work to meet egress, it compromises the roof shape, doesn't quite fit with the original roof that's on there.
Excuse me, can I speak to that for a second?
Yes, if I can just
Sure.
finish real quick, Jeff, and then you can. Sure. And then under B guidelines, roof shape, where it says use roof shape pitches materials that are visually compatible with those of surrounding buildings. Nearly all of the buildings in Cottontown Bellevue have pitch roof with gable hip or combination thereof as a predominant style. Do not introduce roof shapes or pitches that are not found in the area. And again, this inset dormer look is not, we toured the neighborhood, it's not something that we see in the area. You can find it outside the neighborhood, but we always use the neighborhood itself for context. Additionally, we've very, very rarely ever done anything in any neighborhood conservation district where the addition goes above the existing ridge line. We've done it once, I believe, where it went up a little bit behind the front ridge line, but not in front of it. So my talks with the homeowner were, you know, when I started to realize some of the issues we were dealing with, is there any way to scoot this back behind the front of the house so you can get the room that you need, but it still would, in our interpretation, meet the guidelines. And he had some concerns about the interior space and I think stability of the back wall there. But typically, you know, we would have said, stabilize your back wall, try to push it in the back and keep the front as it is, because the intent is to keep the neighborhood reading as a whole as it was when it was built. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Okay.
Can I have a second to...
We'll give you just a quick response so that we can continue with our discussion, if I may.
Okay. Well, my quick response is I'm not digging anything out, and it's a matter of we're trying to create a second floor for a bedroom. I also did speak to the fact that we did not necessarily have to have that lower slope. We could have a small area there where it wouldn't be as much of a slope. It would be more of like maybe a 1-on-12, where we at least be able to get the water off that area and not create water problems. As far as the dormer that we were discussing, if I were to put something behind and actually go up the height that I really would like to do, it would cause more problems, and you can see it from the front of the house, and it would, I believe, would make a more, it would be not as a pleasing elevation as what I have tried to create.
Would it be possible to shift it back? I mean, just looking at the floor plan, it seems like there are different options for how you would get a stair, you know, where you would introduce a stair. But
the biggest situation is where to create to get the stair in.
Right.
We do have a situation right there where I could, you know, if you see on the first floor how I'm creating that stairwell. We don't have any other place within the house to create a stairwell and not compromise the bedrooms or any of the rooms that we have.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments or discussion?
Just a brief comment. I tend to agree that the aesthetics of it are an improvement. But what we're talking about is historic nature and historic materials, and that's what the guideline actually talks about. And so while I would absolutely agree that it's an improvement from a design standpoint, the neighborhood is more about the history, not necessarily what looks good.
I understand. And one last thing, if you were to look under pertinent sections from guidelines, it says, over time, a family, business space needs change, and in order to accommodate these needs, a building may need to be enlarged. While these additions are permitted, they should serve to reinforce and not detract from the existing architectural form and design of the building. And I do not believe I've detracted from the original existing architectural form or design of this building.
Thank you very much, sir. We'll move forward and ask for a motion on this 1317 Geiger Street, please. A certificate of design approval for exterior change.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we accept and approve the design as presented at 1317 Geiger Street.
We have a motion for approval. Is there a second? Is there an alternative motion? We have no second on Mr. Gressett's motion. I will motion that we deny this application at 1317 Geiger Street based on sections 5, 6, and 7 of the guidelines. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion for denial and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I would like to say one thing, which is I think that in this kind of a case, this isn't a referendum depending on if it's a negative vote on the design. I don't feel that way about it, and I think that's been expressed. I think if this is ends up being a vote to deny, in my mind, it has more to do with our charge to at least assure that the street facades of these buildings remain as they were historically, because the neighborhood depends upon that as a result of having voted to make their neighborhood a conservation district. So to me, that is kind of what it boils down to.
Thank you, Mr. Savory. Any further discussion? Sir, at this time, we're not, the proceedings don't allow for a response. We have a motion now for denial and a second. We've had a discussion from the commissioner. We'll move ahead with the roll call for vote, please.
Mr. Bachnight? Ms. Great? The motion is to deny. Mr. Gressett? No. Mr. Cohn?
No.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
That takes us now to other business. I believe we have a presentation coming from staff on the West Gervais Street, on the draft of the West Gervais Street.
Yes. Staff has been working with folks in the Vista, for the last couple of years actually, they asked us to explore some issues in the area and look at the guidelines as well, which were quite old. And so we have had quite a process of public input over time, meeting with individual stakeholders and groups who populate the Vista. We have had a lot of give and take on matters that came up in the plan document which evolved, as well as the revised guidelines. And so at this point in time, we have gotten to a point where people have finalized their input, seem fairly comfortable with the documents. We wanted to bring it forward to y'all. I just wanted to emphasize that the commission's role here is to make a recommendation for the guideline document to council, but not the plan document that goes to Planning Commission for a recommendation. But John Fellows, our planning administrator, is here to just give you information, brief information on the plan document, which supports the guidelines. And then once he's finished with that, then Stacy Ritchie will talk about the guidelines, which are largely just an updated form of the existing guidelines.
Good evening.
Hello, John.
Interesting microphone, okay. Like Amy said, we're going to do a brief introduction of the plan because the plan that I believe you received a copy of in digital form, that plan has a number of recommendations. And like Amy said, one of them is the design guidelines. And as I kind of introduced the plan and talked to you about it, there's some other recommendations that would be coming in the near future also. So the area of study that we looked at is on your screen. It's essentially the Gervais Street corridor, Lady Street, the area around Adlu, and then it goes up to the northern boundary, which consists of Hampton or Washington Street. And that boundary was defined essentially as a little bit, an area larger than the current historic district, and it went down to the river. The historic district, currently there's two of them. There's one over here, which is a protection area, and there's another one over here, which is the commercial historic district. And so we looked at that particular area. As Amy had mentioned, there was a number of things that we were charged to look at. One of them was to look at the updating the guidelines. The other one was height, as well as public spaces, connectivity, and so this particular plan looks into that. We did have a lot of public outreach. We actually had some outreach underneath the train canopy. We had a wish wall where people could put stickers or sticky notes on a window. We also had some meetings at the convention center, and we most recently had one behind the Twisted Spur. I think that was, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, something like that, where we presented this particular plan to the public. The plan addresses land use, it addresses heights, it addresses urban design, and we did get a lot of responses, and on that public participation, you'll have seen on that plan there are some statistics. For instance, about 50% of those surveyed did not realize that there was parking structures in the Vista. And so we learned a lot about this particular plan. And this particular map here talks about the height of the area. And so we were looking at a height overlay in this particular area. It's mostly the historic district, but it does include some properties that are outside of the historic district. The concept for the height overlay is a 30/80, and so if you looked in your document, you had some other pages, but essentially it would have a minimum height of 30 feet and a maximum of 80, but at a certain point there would be a setback of 25 feet. And so that particular implementation element would actually occur with the code rewrite. So we will be giving this information to the planning consultants, and they will work that recommendation into the code rewrite that will happen over the next year. And then the other component of the implementation is the updating the guidelines for the district. And Stacy will talk a little bit more in detail, but the whole point of updating those was to bring a number of documents that are in diverse places into one particular package that would be business-friendly, that would be something we could hand to developers, they could download, and they get all the information in one spot. Currently, if they want to know what the process is, or they want to know the guidelines, or they want to know about signage, it's all in these different documents. And so that was the main point of bringing that together and to make it a more professional document, because some of them are 20 years old and are just sort of typed on a typewriter, so we wanted to make them look a little bit better. And so with that, I'm going to turn it, well, I guess before I turn it over to Stacy, does anybody have any questions about the plan? I can answer any questions, or we can save questions to the end if you'd prefer.
I think we're fine without any questions at this time.
Great.
Thank you, John. Ms. Ritchie.
Good evening. I will be brief. These are the updated guidelines for the West Gervais District, which was created in 1994. And these essentially update the same information that we have always had, but with a lot more clarity, more photographs and maps. These are based on the Secretary of Interior standards, which means we're we identified 3 main building types: the warehouse, the office, and retail. So in case we have buildings coming in that match any of those uses, we can try to use our historic examples to guide those. This is the map. It has not changed. So we still have the west side and the east side, which the west side is a protection area, has very minimal rules. The east side is the commercial district, which the majority of this document pertains to. This is just a flow chart. We tried to make this more user-friendly for customers so they understand a little bit more about how projects are reviewed. Of course, the same things you typically see in our district packages for setback, massing. Also, storefronts are critical in this area, so we address those with a great bit of detail and offer some updated alternatives like a nanowall system. Roof shapes are typically flat, so we encourage that for new construction. And then, of course, we have a section on rehabilitation and maintenance for our existing historic buildings, which form the core of the central commercial district. We address the same things you see in our other historic districts, retaining historic materials and details like our doors and windows. And we have the demolition language in here. That's part of our ordinance, but like John mentioned, we pulled together whatever documents were pertaining to this area so that this would hopefully be a one-stop shop for customers. We went into great detail, thanks to Amy, about signage that would be permissible here and what would not be permissible, to hopefully get a little more clarity on that. This area has a great deal of signage review. And then address the urban design aspects that were present in the city center language, which you've been using today for other projects. That has been pulled into here so that, again, it can be one place for people to look. There's only one page that references the protection area, this page 47, although there are other parts of the document that pertain to the protection area. This is the main page that deals with those reviews. They're very minimal in comparison to the commercial district because there is not much context left in this area. And of course, we did try to bring in a little more helpful information about our incentives and then some guidance on masonry cleaning, things like that. Any questions? Told you I'd be brief.
I believe Mr. Gressett has a question.
Are we still on the air here?
You are. We are.
So one of the things that I have run into designing buildings, that this may or may not be a good opportunity to talk about it, and I guess it has to do with the storefront section, is the percentage of glass that we try to achieve to promote transparency into the building and that feeling. But whatever the percentage is, it seems to me to be a fairly high percentage, a very high percentage. And if that percentage could be applied only to the ground floor or to some prominent cornice line, coming up the building, it would make a lot more sense to me. Just taking it as a percentage of the entire building.
We don't really have the percentage language in this document. So on page 16, if you look at the one in front of you, which may be easier than looking at your screens.
Uh-huh.
This pertains to storefronts for new construction. And
Right. Yeah, and I think you're referencing specifically the DD
the
language.
city center language, so we didn't pull everything in because
Right.
it wouldn't make sense in this context.
Okay.
So the percentage you're speaking about is not something that is specifically here. It's more so that you repeat historic storefront patterns around you for the first floor.
Okay. So we still would be burdened with that existing percentage of glass.
No, this is the document for.
This is the new one, so
for the
this is a little bit,
Specific for this district.
Just for this particular district.
You never had that percentage requirement in the historic district, but
Okay.
it does remain
In the rest of
in
the city center.
It gets
Okay.
confusing.
I would recommend when the time comes to change it in the other document as well, because it's not a good rule. Yeah, okay.
That was the document you've been using earlier, but I
Right.
understand, yes.
Okay, well, when the time comes, let's work on that.
Understood, thank you for the recommendation.
And I will say, you know, it's confusing a little bit, but we've always used the signage language in the DD to address signage in the historic district because the DD underlies the historic district. So we largely just brought over that language into this document, but fleshed out some things that have been unclear or needed addressing, like how do you properly install a very, very large sign? We need engineer drawings for those to make sure they don't damage a historic structure, things like that.
Anybody else? Mr. Savory?
Yes, if I may take the liberty of pointing out a typo.
Yo, please do
While
so.
we're all sitting here and, in the interest of making everything better, on page 18, it is number 4 under materials. It is you mean the, nope, I stand corrected. Never mind. I'm not going to tell you.
Now, I see a hand that's gone up over here. This is actually a presentation to the commission. I see you've been waiting here for the entire meeting. So I will allow, have you sworn? Okay, if you'll step to the podium, if you have a comment.
I think it's fine because we are asking for
It's a public
motion from y'all.
meeting, absolutely. So if you'll raise your right hand, please, and do you affirm to tell the truth as you speak to us? Thank you very much. State your name.
My name
And
is
we'll
Mary
pull the-
Langston,
There you.
and I'm a resident of the Vista. And I'm sorry, we were under the impression that we would be allowed to
Oh,
talk
you're
about this.
you're welcome to, please.
I'm a resident of the Vista. I live in City Club, and I'm also a member of the Vista Neighborhood Association, which is a pretty new association, but it's for all the residents in the Vista. Our major concern has been just the height and what's going to happen, and I see that you are not surprised by that. It's a beautiful area. We pay a lot of money in taxes. We love where we live. We bought on the river. From the back of our 4th floor, we can see Adlu Flower and the Capitol. And I know with some of the other changes, like that 15 floor, that's going up a hill. So it may be 15 stories, but when you're coming up that hill, it's going to seem a lot higher. Our concern is that when they do the new development, that it's still taken into consideration what the neighborhoods want. And we live here all the time. We'd really like to be considered, because apparently some of the discussion was, well, those are the rules, but and that scares us, because it's sort of like, if you tell me when I come in that door I can't have a concealed weapon, nobody's going to say to me, oh, well, it's okay if it's only that big. They're going to say, you don't bring it in here. And I know that's a different kind of an example, but I just feel like if the guidelines are set up, they should be adhered to, and not all the exceptions. And an example I'll give you, and then I'll be quiet, is there was a restaurant that opened on, I think it was on Lincoln Street, and I remember watching on Channel 2, where the discussion came up about the exception to parking. Well, they didn't really have enough spots for parking, but they could maybe give out vouchers and people could go over to the parking garages. I don't think everybody knows that there are maybe 286 spots in the parking garages. They do know that they're around here. Some use them, some don't. But that business, I believe, went out of business because they didn't have enough parking. And they fought and they fought and they fought, and they also had issues with the signage. Whatever happened, they left. And their feeling was if they had known up front that this was going to be an issue for people even to do takeout, they probably wouldn't have invested the money they did in the downtown area. So now that business left, and that's going to leave a bad taste in an empty building, and they're going to tell other people the same story. You know, and Columbia doesn't have the best reputation for supporting businesses coming in, and I think some of the reasons are because we want it to be, everybody to be taken care of, but some of it too is some of the red tape, like the guy that wanted to change his house. So thank you for allowing me to talk.
Thank you, ma'am, for your response. I will take the license or the opportunity, though, to voice not a response so much as to just make a statement here, both for your edification and the public's. As the city grows, there's no question that there is a change from what Columbia has been all along, neighborhood by neighborhood, but certainly in the city center. The staff here of the Planning and Development Department here has worked tirelessly for weeks and months and maybe even over the years that have passed, and they're continuing to work to consolidate what had been old plans, to work with the zoning commission and the planning commission of the city to establish new guidelines throughout. It's a monumental effort. I am not completely aware of every rule and regulation, but I do know that what has prompted the move here toward a new comprehensive plan for the city is something that has, in the world of planning, has been mandated almost every 10 years, I believe it is. So that's one of the reasons that this is happening. Historically here in Columbia, you have perhaps one block that is owned, let's say C3, and the very next block could be M1. This was a very industrial city for most of it anyway, over the years historically. So there's a changing element here that demands recognition of the various neighborhoods and desires, but also one that has to speak to a booming growth and a university city that demands change. So one of our problems, or not problems, but challenges as a DDRC, Design Development Review Commission, is to work within the guidelines as they exist, but as they're changing, and with input from yourselves and the rest of the population of this city, along with the planning and development staff, try to find what works best and what really can meet all the needs as this city grows. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit what's going on. And with that, I think we have to approve minutes from the last meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, we do need to move on to recommendation. Thank you, Stacy. I see the distress on your face. So with that, as I understand, the recommendation we are making tonight is to move this to City Council
Positive recommendation for the updated guidelines.
for the updated guidelines. Do we have a motion for moving this by recommendation, or as a recommendation to City Council? Thank you. We have a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
We've got a second as well. Any further discussion? Roll call for vote, please.
Mr. Bachnight?
Yes.
Ms. Great? Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes from the June 9th meeting of the DDRC. We've got a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second for adjournment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
3 hour meeting.